The story of Noah's Ark is one of the most well-known tales in history. It comes from the Bible in the book of Genesis. God saw the wickedness of humanity and decided to start over. He chose Noah, a righteous man, to build a giant ark. Noah was to bring his family and 2 of every animal onto the ark. This would save them from a massive flood. The flood came and covered the entire earth. All living things outside the ark perished. The rain lasted for 40 days and 40 nights. When the waters receded, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. This marked a new beginning for mankind. Noah and his family left the ark. They began to repopulate the earth. God promised never to flood the world again. He created the rainbow as a symbol of this promise. To this day, the story of Noah's Ark serves as a reminder of God's power and mercy. The story of Noah's Ark continues to fascinate people around the world. It is a tale of faith, obedience, and second chances. The search for the ark itself has become a quest for some. They believe that finding the ark would prove the truth of the biblical account. Mount Ararat is a dormant volcano in Turkey. It is the highest peak in the country. The Bible mentions that Noah's Ark landed on the mountains of Ararat. This has led many people to believe that it landed on the highest peak. Mount Ararat's imposing presence and its connection to the biblical story makes it a place of intrigue. Explorers and researchers have been drawn to it for centuries. They are hoping to find evidence of the legendary Ark. For centuries, people have been searching for Noah's Ark. The earliest recorded expedition was in the 4th century AD. A group of monks climbed Mount Ararat. They hoped to find the Ark and bring back a relic. In modern times, technology has aided the search. Aerial photography, satellite imagery, and ground-penetrating radar have been used. Despite these efforts, no conclusive evidence of the Ark has been found. Let's look at science and the Great Flood. The story of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood is a matter of faith for many. However, scientists have offered alternative explanations for the flood myth. Some believe it could have been a catastrophic local event. Others argue that it is a symbolic story. It teaches lessons about humanity's relationship with God. The scientific community generally agrees that a global flood as described in the Bible is not possible. There is simply not enough water on Earth to make it happen. Despite this, the story continues to capture imaginations and inspire debate. This is a mountain of challenges. Mount Ararat is a formidable and dangerous mountain. Its high altitude makes breathing difficult. The weather conditions are unpredictable. One moment it can be sunny, the next a blizzard. The terrain is treacherous with steep slopes, glaciers and crevasses. Beyond the natural challenges, there are political tensions in the region. This further complicates expeditions to find the Ark. Will we ever find Noah's Ark? The search for Noah's Ark is a testament to the power of belief. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence, many people remain hopeful. They point to eyewitness accounts and blurry photographs as proof. They believe that one day the Ark will be found. Whether or not the Ark is ever found, the story will continue to resonate. It speaks to our fascination with ancient mysteries and our desire to connect with the past. The search for Noah's Ark is a journey of faith and exploration. It will likely continue for generations to come.
Okay, so you know how some mysteries just kind of, I don't know, stick with you?
Like they pop into your head at the weirdest times.
Yeah, for me it's got to be the whole Noah's Ark thing, supposedly up there on Mount Ararat in Turkey.
Have you looked into this at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah?
Oh, quite a bit. It's fascinating.
Because it's a staggering, the height of that mountain, over 5,000 meters, 16,000 feet.
Incredible.
Just to picture this legendary ship, the survivor of a world-changing flood, potentially still locked up there in ice somewhere. It's hard to even imagine.
Right.
No, it really captures the imagination, doesn't it? And I think it touches on so many different areas that fascinate us as humans.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like history, religion, adventure.
Yeah, and just this idea of something so ancient, still potentially out there to be discovered. So, for everyone listening, joining us for this deep dive, we really want to get into it.
Yeah.
Explore the origins of the story, the efforts, the determined efforts people have gone to in order to find the Ark, and the physical evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, the evidence, or lack thereof.
And what science actually has to say about the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So our goal is to kind of connect the dots here, right? Really shed light on why this centuries-old search just keeps going.
Great.
It's not going away, is it?
No, it's not. And of course, we have to talk about the very real challenges that come with this. I mean, we're talking extreme environment.
Extreme.
Dangerous terrain, geopolitics getting involved.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's not a simple thing to just go up there and have a look around.
No, not at all. Okay, so I think a good place to start is just to sort of, set the scene a bit.
Sure.
Like, where does this epic tale begin to take shape?
Sure.
So, let's dive into the origins of the Noah's Ark story. This tale has been passed down through generations, captivating the minds of countless individuals. But where did it all begin? How did this story become such an integral part of our cultural and religious history? We'll explore the ancient texts and illustrations that first brought this epic tale to life, and trace its journey through time to understand its enduring significance. Well, I think for most people, the most familiar version is going to be from the Bible, the book of Genesis. Yeah, that makes sense.
God commands Noah to build this massive ark.
Chapters 6 through 9. That's where the whole story is, right?
To save his family and all the animals.
Exactly, from this global flood that's coming.
Right, and then the ark eventually comes to rest on the mountains of Ararat.
Right. Those are the words that are used. And I think that's an interesting point because it's not just a single mountain. It's a whole region.
Right, the mountains of Ararat.
Yeah.
It's not super specific.
Yep.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that this story of a massive flood, it's not just in the Bible, it pops up in other ancient cultures too.
Oh, that's right. There are other flood stories. What were some of those?
So in the Quran you have Surah 11, it mentions the ark but says it settled on Mount Judy. Now
this has led to a lot of debate among scholars about whether Mount Judy is the same place as Ararat or a completely different mountain.
So maybe they're talking about the same general region, or maybe completely different places.
Exactly. And these slightly different accounts might actually point to something really interesting, like the possibility of multiple localized flood events.
Yeah, like huge floods, but maybe not a global flood covering the entire Earth. And if you go even further back in time, you've got the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Exactly. And then these stories got woven into broader cultural narratives, maybe even exaggerated over time.
Oh yeah, the Epic of Gilgamesh, that's Mesopotamian, right?
That's right. It's much older than the Bible or the Quran.
Yeah, but it also has a story of this huge flood. It's very similar.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So we've got different cultures, different time periods, all with these stories of massive, devastating floods.
Exactly. And that suggests these floods, whether local or global, made a huge impact on early human societies.
Yeah, they were clearly something people never forgot. So, why is there such a focus on Mount Ararat when it comes to the story of Noah's Ark?
Well, Mount Ararat has become a symbol, almost a mythic place in the search for the Ark.
Yeah, and it's not just about the biblical narrative. There have been numerous expeditions and claims of sightings.
Exactly. People have been fascinated with finding physical evidence of the Ark for centuries.
And the mountain itself being so prominent and challenging to explore adds to the allure.
Right. Its remote location and harsh conditions make it a perfect candidate for mystery and legend.
So even if the Ark isn't there, the search itself has become part of the story.
Absolutely. It's a quest that captures the imagination and keeps the story of Noah's Ark alive in modern times.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate historical treasure hunt.
Exactly. And that's why Mount Ararat remains such a focal point in discussions about Noah's Ark.
Fascinating. The mountain itself has become almost as legendary as the Ark it's supposed to hold.
Indeed. It's a powerful symbol that continues to intrigue and inspire people around the world.
Where did that connection come from? So how did the search get narrowed down to this specific Mount Ararat in Turkey? So, getting back to the Bible for a second, it says the mountains of Ararat, and we've talked about that. Exactly.
Well, when the Bible talks about Ararat, it's actually referring to a kingdom, an ancient region.
Okay, so not the mountain itself.
No, it covered parts of what we now know as Turkey, Armenia, and Iran.
So why do we focus on this one particular mountain now?
It seems like over time the focus shifted to this specific mountain.
And a big part of that seems to be those eyewitness accounts that started popping up a few centuries after the Bible was written.
So people were claiming to have seen the Ark?
Yeah, claiming to have seen it or remnants of it on this particular mountain.
Wow. And even though they might not have had hard proof, those stories obviously had a huge impact.
Oh, absolutely. They shaped the narrative and inspired many of the searches that came later.
Yeah, it's easy to see how those stories would capture people's imaginations.
Absolutely. What were some of the main concerns?
Despite all the stories and the searches, there have been significant challenges and honestly, a lack of concrete proof. The terrain of Mount Ararat is incredibly harsh and difficult to navigate, making any exploration a daunting task. Additionally, the political climate in the region has often made it hard for researchers to gain access. And of course, there's the issue of time. Over thousands of years, any wooden structure would be subject to decay and the elements. So, while the legend of Noah's Ark continues to captivate, the search for tangible evidence remains elusive. Well, for one thing, when they analyzed the wood, it seemed to be much younger than it should have been if it was from Noah's Ark.
So not thousands of years old?
No, it seemed much more recent.
And the way the wood was put together, the construction techniques, didn't really match up with what we know about ancient shipbuilding.
It looked more like something built much later, maybe even from some of the human settlements that we know existed on Ararat.
Exactly. And it just highlights one of the biggest challenges with this search, figuring out what's genuinely ancient and what's just something more recent or even a natural formation.
Yeah, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the haystack is on top of a really dangerous mountain.
That's a good way to put it.
So we've had all these expeditions, all these sightings going back centuries, but still, no one's come back with undeniable proof.
Right.
Why is that? What makes finding the Ark, if it's even up there, such a huge challenge?
Mount Ararat is just an incredibly harsh and unforgiving place. I think we have to start with the environment itself. Well, there are a lot of reasons.
Yeah, it's not exactly a walk in the park.
No, not at all. You've got extreme weather conditions up there. Sudden blizzards, heavy snowfall.
It's not just in the winter, right?
And then you've got ice falls, avalanches. It's really dangerous. No, the snow can stick around all year.
And just the altitude itself, right? 5,000 meters, that's incredibly high. You need to acclimatize to the thin air.
Yes, that's a huge challenge. You need specialized equipment. It's not something you can just decide to climb on a whim.
And then there's the issue of the ice itself.
No, you need to be a serious mountaineer.
I mean, if the Ark, or what's left of it, is up there, it's probably buried under a lot of ice.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about glaciers that have been building up for thousands of years. Of solid ice. It's a monumental task.
So the mountain itself is basically a huge obstacle course.
Yeah, a very dangerous obstacle course, and then, on top of that, you've got the political situation, which isn't easy either.
Right, because Mount Ararat is in a pretty sensitive spot, geopolitically speaking.
Yes, it's very close to the borders of Armenia and Iran, and for many years the Turkish government has had strict rules about who can go up there and what they can do.
They don't just let anyone wander around looking for the Ark.
No, not at all. Unauthorized excavations are forbidden.
And even just getting access to certain parts of the mountain can be very difficult. It's a militarized zone.
And I imagine the conflict with Kurdish groups in the region hasn't made things any easier.
No, definitely not. It adds another layer of risk and complexity to any expedition. So even if you were lucky enough to find something, getting permission to properly investigate it would be a huge challenge. You'd have to deal with a lot of bureaucracy and diplomacy. So it's not just about the mountain, it's about the politics, the history, the whole region. It's a very complex situation. When we look at the story of Noah's Ark from a scientific perspective, it becomes clear that there are many challenges to the idea of a wooden ship surviving for thousands of years. The decay process, the environmental conditions, and the geological factors all play significant roles. Exactly. And then, even if you could overcome all those hurdles, you still have to deal with the fact that we're talking about something that's supposedly thousands of years old and made of wood.
Right. Yes, that's a key point. I mean, wood is an organic material. It breaks down over time.
It decays, it rots.
Exactly. And while the cold and the ice on Mount Ararat might slow down that process, it doesn't stop it completely. In fact, the freezing and thawing cycles could actually damage the wood even more.
So even in those conditions, it's unlikely that a huge wooden ship would survive intact for thousands of years.
It's not impossible, but it's highly improbable. That's the scientific consensus, yes.
And then there's also the chance of just misinterpreting things, right? I mean, Mount Ararat has all kinds of unusual rock formations.
Absolutely. So it's possible that people are seeing things in those photos and thinking it's the Ark when it's really just a rock.
It's easy to see patterns and shapes where they don't really exist.
Yes, it's very possible.
Yeah, especially in blurry or distant images.
And then, of course, there's the whole question of whether the flood story should be interpreted literally in the first place. Cries, yeah. Yeah, right, because some people believe it's more of a symbolic or mythological story, not a historical event. So that brings us to the scientific perspective. What does science actually have to say about the possibility of a global flood?
Well, the vast majority of scientists in fields like geology and archaeology don't support the idea of a global flood that covered the entire Earth, at least not in the way it's described in the Bible.
And they're basing that on what they see in the geological record, right?
Exactly. The evidence just isn't there. There's no sign of a worldwide flood that submerged all the continents to the depths described in the story. But that doesn't mean there weren't large, significant floods in the past.
Right, like maybe regional floods that had a huge impact on the people who lived through them.
Exactly. For example, there's a theory called the Black Sea flood hypothesis, which is really interesting.
What's that about?
Well, it suggests that around 7,500 years ago, there was a massive flood in the Black Sea region.
How did that happen?
The theory is that the sea level rose, and the Bosphorus Strait, which connects the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, was breached.
And all this water rushed in, flooding the Black Sea basin?
Exactly. It would have been devastating for the people living in that area. Some scholars believe that this event, or maybe other similar floods, could have been the inspiration for the flood stories we see in different cultures.
So these stories might be based on real events, but maybe they got exaggerated and spread over time.
And you know, it's important to remember that flood myths are very common in ancient cultures all around the world. That's one possibility.
Why do you think that is?
And they would have left a lasting impression on the people who experienced them. They could be incredibly destructive. Well, I think it's because floods were a very real threat.
It makes sense that they would become part of their stories and beliefs.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Until then.